Hey, Last in Line Nation. Hey, welcome to another episode here in April. We are about to close this topic out of mythology. So we're learning what are the myths that we are told in life, and what are the truths that are really out there, and what do we believe, what are we holding on to. So I have a guest today that has been uh, all over the athletic realms. He's a baseball guy by trade, but we're going to go into some other amazing stuff that he's done. But I want to introduce you to Daryl Jones, and he was drafted in 2005 in the third round by the St. Louis Cardinals baseball team. He's out of Spring High School right here in Houston, Texas, and over a 7-year period. He played pro baseball with the Cardinals and the Reds organizations, and this is something pretty cool. The St. Louis Cardinals kind of identify some of their top talent. Well, he was top 5 prospect, and basically they were labeling or identifying him as with just one of their top most raw athletes that they had ever seen come through. And his speed was impeccable. Baseball America rated him as uh, the St. Louis Cardinals' best athlete and fastest base runner, which is a great accomplishment. So here's a couple of other things that he did. In 2008, he was the St. Louis Cardinals minor league player of the year. The Futures game he was in, excuse me, in 2009, and then made the MLB roster in 2009. So that's a crazy accomplishments, man. I mean, those of you who know how hard it is to even make it that far in baseball, just for a second, and for him to accomplish those things is incredible. But after baseball, this guy has done some magnificent stuff. Like he is. Continues to be a community leader. Like he's involved in coaching the youth baseball programs around the area, the high school, homeschool teams around the area. Like he is equipping young athletes to maximize their abilities on and off the field. He published his own, book in 2016 called God Cares About Sports. And, Daryl's goal, and I've known him for a little while now, but I can tell you with confidence that his goal, he lives it. His goal is to use his talents and abilities, and he inspires and motivates others and brings it out of them. So let me formally welcome Daryl Jones to the show.
Thanks, John. I appreciate you having me on, man.
Yeah, it's a privilege, man. It's a long time coming. We've known each other, and I'm glad we were able to do this. We're
Yes,
gonna
sir.
anything else about you that you feel like is worthwhile mentioning, so the audience kind of connects on a personal level with Daryl Jones.
Yeah, man. No, obviously, as you stated, I love sports. I also love people, and leaving, finishing my career off a few years ago, definitely was a turning point in my life. I it probably I can't say it was the best or easiest time of my life, but it definitely due to the pains of having a transition to ministering, coaching, teaching, training, things like that. I've learned a lot about myself, learned a lot about people, especially learned a lot of leadership. So that's what I'm excited to talk about today.
That's awesome. Yeah, this is good, Ben, because we always try to stay grounded in our foundation here of servant leadership and faith-based platform, and just right out of the Bible where Mark 9:35 says, if you want to, I'll paraphrase, you want to be first, you got to be last of all and servant of all. So
Right.
we're all about
Right.
last in line leadership here. And I've seen you exhibit that in church leadership and sports leadership and just all different things. So, man, as we dive into what is true, the TRUE, we're going to dissect and unpack this word true and
Mm.
trustworthy, revealed, underestimated, and eternal. So let me ask you, just to start out, man, what is what are some sources of information that we view trustworthy, and what are some of the traps that we get in on what we believe? We got a lot of stuff coming at us, and there's a lot of I guess we got to have that internal filter of what we really
Yeah,
hold on to. And so
absolutely.
what's been your experience with how to sort of filter those sources of information?
Well, I think you stated before, having an internal value system. In today's age, there's so much information being thrown at you, and as a leader, and personally, I believe everyone is a leader. Maybe we sometimes don't display those leadership abilities, but I think everyone is a leader. And to start off with, a lot of us simply don't know that we're leaders. We look at leaders as someone who maybe is at the top of their industry, or somebody who's a CEO, or somebody who calls himself a leader. But my first thing, to keep from falling into those traps, is understanding that you are a leader. It's hard to pull out something that you don't realize is there. And so that's a trap that I really believe that is there. Is you know mainstream media tries to a lot of times say that this is what you need to become, instead of realizing this is what you are now. You just need to grow and position yourself into positions that can really expose what's inside you. So that's my biggest thing, is really the identity, and understanding that who you are as a leader, regardless of what field, age, all that. That's my biggest.
That's real good, because we can, I mean, if we let it, and then we haven't established it up front in ourselves to buy into the fact of
Right.
what you just said, then those sources of information can kind of knock us around and direct us, instead of us sort of directing
Yeah.
it. And so for you to say that, I'm
Yeah.
glad you said that, because I've said 100 times, everybody's got influence. So therefore everybody
Right.
is a leader. And I totally
Right.
agree with that. And, man, do you see, like, some of the people that you talk to, and in leadership yourself, um,
Mhm.
what have you experienced or seen that people are, trustworthiness is one of those things that seems to be a real gray area right now.
Yeah.
Like, it
Yeah.
seems to be like we're deciding the criteria of what is trustworthy, instead of just standing on truth and it being black and white, like it is or it isn't, right? So I think we've developed this gray area in our society. Talk
Man.
about
Yeah.
talk about how that can be sort of that could be catastrophic at times if we let it.
Yeah, no, I look at it like this, man. Boundaries, setting. If you a person that has set clear boundaries, and kind of goes, you said before, values and limitations. I believe that you can trust a person that has set boundaries and limitations, because they're telling. I mean, it's like in sports, man. These are the lines right here, and if you go out of bounds, I'm gonna let you know about it. If not, it kind of goes back into because if I'm hearing this question correctly, it has a lot to do with can I trust you? Are you trustworthy, like you said? And I believe a person, whether you agree with them or not, someone who has said, this is where I am in a relationship, this is what you're not going to say to me, this is what I'm going to allow. And sometimes your actions can show that to someone. Ultimately, your actions are typically over time are going to show you whether you're trustworthy or not. Coming up through the minor league, your actions show whether you're trustworthy to move to the next level. And so ultimately, at the end of the day, what you put out there on a regular basis that's your brand. That's whether we show whether you can be trusted or not. I mean, I
Yeah.
don't know how it's
Yeah.
really not a super science to it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I'm credible or trustworthy in baseball because I've shown over 20 plus years that I can do this.
Right. Right.
So that's kind of my
Yeah,
two
man.
cents on.
And that's good, because what I'm hearing you say, just to kind of pile on to, is, man, you're you reflect, so your actions reflect the boundaries that you've already established within yourself. So
100%.
like that's if
100%.
you're a reflection of that, people will know, like they get it, they
Right.
know where that electric fence is around you,
Right.
as an analogy. So that's a
Our
good point.
internal system.
Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
good point, man, because you've established it and people know, so they know what not to do and what to do or say around you, and you've established your
Right.
credibility, like you said. So, man, that's good, man. I like that. So let's move on to our, the TRUE. Let's talk about revealed. I mean, we talk about revelation, we talk about clarity.
Mhm.
I want to hear from you. I mean, you've had a lot of experiences in the sports world, but you've also had a lot of experiences after that in leadership
Mhm.
and in mentoring and coaching. And man, I think that's a huge aspect of your life, and it matters to a great deal. So talk about a moment, and I'm going to guess probably in that transition from knowing you had to hang up the cleats, right? And
Yeah.
so talk about a
Yeah.
moment that defined sort of the direction you took, and what part of your character that exposed, and whether you did it right, whether you would have changed some things, or whether
Oof.
what can you tell us about that?
Are you sure? Are you sure? He said, "Are you sure you want to hear this?" Um, no, man. Honest, if I'm keeping it 100 with you, um,
And the reason I
as
ask
you
you
know,
this, hold on, the reason I ask you this is because I think there's somebody out there that might be going through something similar. Like that's why we
yeah,
do this. If they learn something from you and hear Daryl
yeah,
Jones' story, like it shows that, hey, okay, I'm not by myself in this. So talk a little bit, and
yeah.
and do it as you feel comfortable. But I'm just saying, like, there had to be a defining moment.
Oh man, I think the transition in itself was the defining moment because that entailed, a lot of stuff that I didn't realize was there inside of me. And I tell guys all the time when I'm sharing my story that you don't really realize as pro athletes probably, and I'm not going to speak for everyone because I can't, but knowing that I've been at the highest level and been around a lot of guys and just guys in general, I can tell you that pro athletes are maybe some of your most insecure people in the world. And there's a lot of them because there's so much you can hide from on the field, on the court. It's an entertainment business. And what I realized is that I spent a lot of years entertaining, but not too many years dealing with the hurts and the pains that went all the way back to my childhood, living in a fatherless home. um, you know, as you know, with sports comes the party life, and womenizing and addictions in that area. So going through that transition, not having baseball or a pro athlete title to lean on anymore, it turned into former, which nobody wants to hear former in the first, their title. You meet a guy and he say, "What do you do?" You ain't trying to say I'm a former, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's like, why are you still hanging on to that? But not having that title um, really spoke to me. It's like, okay, who are you now? You know, what do you now? Because now you can't go by, hey, I play for the St. Louis Cardinals right now, or and so I had to learn that I was valuable without the title, learn that I was valuable without hanging on to pro athlete. Now it still opened up doors. I believe that that my past has opened up doors,
Yeah.
but understanding that my value was not tied to my outside performance. That's the biggest thing that I learned. And honestly, honest, having not having baseball forced me to obviously deal with some character issues. And more, it forced me to deal with that. There's other things that God put inside of me that are good. I mean, I would have never wrote the book, you know. I'm currently writing books right now, and there's a lot of young loves that I had on the inside of me that got pushed down just because I was simply a ball player and athlete that I'm now rediscovering. And actually, it's cool timing because my grandmother actually sent me birthday money ahead of time to go purchase a saxophone that I want to relearn because that's what I love music and I actually
Oh
played the
wow.
saxophone. I'm really good at it. So I'm starting to pick up a lot of different things that I'm more than an athlete and there's just more in me.
That's so
So
good, man.
that's the biggest thing I've discovered.
That's so good. I
There's more.
mean, who would have? I mean, I think you made a huge point earlier when you said, like, it's easy for entertainers, whether it be in the sports world or the celebrity life of Hollywood or whatever. It's easy for that to be your refuge to hide from
Yeah.
some of the other stuff. And people will never
Yes.
know it about you because all they
Yeah.
see is that glamour. that you portray, you know. Let's kind of segue into that next part of that this revealed section. What would you say maybe to somebody that's coming up, uh, and they're a high
Mm,
profile athlete, they're highly recruited, highly sought after, even draftable right now as a young person?
mhm,
What would you kind of give them as kind of answers to the test, if you will,
mm.
as to what to be conscious of? And you know what I'm saying? So, like with their character, what would you tell them to stand on?
Man, I mean, obviously, my mother instilled the word of God into me at a young age. Now, whether I was living that out at the time or really
Yeah.
is another thing, but she planted those seeds in me. So you have to have, just like building a house, you have to have a strong foundation.
Hmm.
And I would strongly, advise guys to really take the time to say, okay, if I didn't have this, if I didn't have sports, who am I?
Hmm.
What
Hmm.
would I do? Because, and I think this is an interesting topic, especially where we're at now, because we're in an age where people are really discovering that, okay, I can still dominate in sports and still have value outside of my sports. I can still have, in fact, my comfort outside of the sport is what gives me the ability to dominate in the sport.
Right.
Um, so I remember, I had 31 football scholarships. Playing. A lot of people don't know that about me,
Mm.
but that what they don't know is that I also internally said, I don't want to be a football. I don't want to be I don't want to go to college play football. I want to be a pro athlete. I want to be a pro ball player in baseball, and I want to go straight out of high school. But what happened was when when it came to football, I didn't care to such a point in a good way. I wasn't afraid to make mistakes. I wasn't afraid. I was free. So I
Yep.
naturally performed. What I
Right.
what I located in baseball is I cared too much to the point where every little mistake
Right.
was the end all. And I mean, I'm talking about a lot of athletes go through this. A
Yeah.
lot of them go through this. I
Right.
mean, it's life or death if you don't perform well on the field.
Yeah.
So
Yep. Yeah. So that's a great point. So how do we, as we're talking about defining moments in Revelation and what's being revealed and God revealing different things about us within us, I almost think that the defining moment for people is not to let that define you. You know, that's a defining moment
huge.
in and of
Yeah,
itself, is to
yeah,
not
100%,
let
100%,
that sport
100%.
or that, that title at work or
Wow, that's
whatever
good.
whatever status you have in the community. The defining moment for you is to not let those define you, because there's so much
Yes.
more, and
Yes.
God has created us for more than that. And guess what? For those that are listening, your successes don't necessarily translate automatically into significance unless you make it about somebody else. Unless you
Right.
leverage your position like you're doing, like you're leveraging your athleticism and your status as a pro athlete in the past, you're leveraging that now to make a difference for other people. And I think that's
Right.
huge, as long as you can keep that in perspective. And that's for anybody listening that has some sort of CEO title or pastor title or whatever title you have. That doesn't define you. What defines you is the significance you have in somebody else's life. So,
Mhm.
man, I think it's good. I think we can hop and close the book on revealed, because man, you hit that out of the park, and no pun intended on that. But let's go to the U. Um, let's go to the U and TRUE, man. We're unpacking this word true. We're unpacking the
Yeah.
myths that we believe about ourselves, the lies that we have an enemy that he tells us every day. So we're unpacking truth. The U is underestimated. Man, I think I want to hit this from two angles here. I want to
Yeah.
ask you, have you ever underestimated God first? And then I'll ask you my other question. But how have you underestimated God?
Man, I've done that several times. I mean, I mean, it's I've underestimated God in the fact that, I look at when you're worrying, when you're constant allowing yourself to lose peace. I remember this. Um, one of my mentors told me this, and I've never forgotten it. He said, if you're always walking around angry, it's a good sign that you're not trusting God. And I didn't realize what that meant at the time, but when I finally got released from the Reds, and I remember on that way home, you're going through the emotional deal, and part of you's like, oh, it's all good, it's gonna be okay, and then the next part of you is, bawling your eyes out because you're looking back at all the stuff, and then when you get home, there's another deal because your family's waiting for you, and so there's little ecstasy, like all that's good, and then 2 weeks later go by. And it's like that honeymoon stage is over. It's like, okay, what am I going to do with my life? And then you start thinking about, well, how did I even get here? What the heck? Because at that time, I had 2 mortgages. We had just bought a new house. So I think my wife I think she had just moved into that house, got the kids moved in. Boom, I get released. And so there's some scary times there. We didn't know how we were going to pay the mortgage because I wasn't working. I mean, my wife's always made good money, but when you're paying for 2 mortgages and you still got all this bill, now it's a different story when my income drastically took a hit. And so I remember my sister called me about a blue and said, hey, and I hadn't even told my sister that we were going through those things. And she called me out the blue and said, hey, I got some extra money. And I don't know, for some reason, God put it on my heart to give you, this money. So she gave us a couple $1,000, just out of blue. I never told anybody. Nobody knew about us needing that money. And I remember just bawling my tears out because I was like, wow, my here we are struggling and going through these things. And, God's like, man, I got that thing taken care of. And so, and then there's other little things that he just kind of, does, and you look back and say, man, that's his favorite, bro. It's like there's nothing that we could have done to do that. And we're sitting there freaking out the whole time, and it was just had nothing to do, like it was us in here. Like he had that thing covered the whole time. But when I look back on now, that was a test to see, okay, let me show you I got you.
Yeah, and that's cool because of that what you said earlier about the guy that told you that if you're always angry or discontented, even I'll add, it shows you're not trusting God. And I get that because, man, there's a peace that comes with trust.
Yes.
I think those go
Yes.
hand in hand. I think so. If our trust is wavering, our peace is wavering, then all of a sudden we're starting to unravel, in other areas. So, man, I love that because I mean, we all could grow a little bit in that area. Some of us, we could grow a
Absolutely.
lot in the trust area. And so, underestimating God, of course, everybody does it, even though they don't realize they're doing it. It's
Right.
not like we could wake up every day and say, I think I'm going to underestimate God today. I think it's so
Right.
much based on the natural and what we see in
Absolutely.
circumstances. And we're too much of a victim of our surroundings sometimes instead of holding right in that sweet spot of, what's the baseline here? Every day, the baseline never changes. It's God is good. He's got a plan, and I just need to be in obedience. So that's perfect, man. And
Yeah.
along these underestimated lines too, like what do you think people underestimate about themselves? Like I think that holds us back because you mentioned at the very beginning, everybody's a leader. Nobody really, or not nobody, but a lot of people don't realize it or they deny it. Doesn't mean it's not true. Just because you
Mhm.
deny something doesn't mean the truth takes away the truth. So talk about how people underestimate themselves.
Man, I think I don't, no matter how we try to go around it and act like we can do it without, I mean, every one of us have a source. The lights in my room have a source. They're connected to a source. And I just think it's so easy to underestimate yourself when you don't understand who your source is. And that's the biggest key. Society right now is, society is big on putting it on you. I think it's hard, it's easy to underestimate yourself. Let me backtrack on that because one thing that I talk to young people about is having confidence. And I like to flip it around a little bit because I believe that we all have confidence. But what we put our confidence in or who we put our confidence in is the difference. And understanding that I can put my confidence in who I am on the outside, or I can put my confidence on who I am on the inside.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm going through a hard time, it's going to be very difficult for my flesh, my outward,
Mm-hmm.
body or flesh to to stay calm, if you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
That thing's flipping out. And so I believe that you have to, like you mentioned before, have an inward peace in that. But I don't think that comes without, establishing that relationship with God. Because I'm a firm believer that you get to know yourself as you get to know God, because
Yeah.
God created us in our own image. So to neglect God, we actually are neglecting ourselves at the same time. We think that there's two separate entities, and God's like, no, I
Wow.
created you for me, and I'm in you and you're in me, that whole deal. And so we do ourselves no. So it's easy to lose it's hard for you to have confidence in yourself when you're not
Yep.
connected to the power. I mean, and that's the easiest way that I can break it up.
Yeah.
General population, tries to say it's different, but I mean, I just talked to my boy yesterday, and he's at that turning point right now. He's like, man, there's something pulling me. There's something, and I think everybody gets to that, whether they're willing to admit or not. It's like, man, there's got to be more to this thing. And if you want to accomplish that, you got to know that there's more than just you. So I'm a big believer in knowing that you can't do it in your own strength.
Yeah.
You can't. So I don't want to have confidence in me alone.
I mean, you hit it, you hit the nail on the head when you said source. I think that packages that up in one word, the source. Like if you know your source, and everybody has their own, they fill in their own
Yeah.
blanks of what that source is. And I think
Right.
you said it right, because if your source isn't right internally, then what comes out externally is going to manifest itself, and it's going to be visible. And then we're going to really get to see who you are. Because
Right.
it comes out. But yeah, the source is important, man. And really, there's no other way other than God's way. And why would I want any other source when he wrote the manual, like the owner's
Yeah.
manual, and if I could talk directly to, if I got a problem with my computer, and, I got the direct line to Bill Gates, why would I not call
Right.
him? If I got an open
Right.
invitation, why would I sit here and try to troubleshoot on my own? So the
Right.
Bible and prayer is a direct line to God. Like, why would I not use that? So,
Mhm.
man, that's awesome. Let's go in. Let's tie this up, man. And at the end here, it's all about perspective, in my opinion. And so as we're talking
Mhm.
about what's true, we've talked a lot indirectly about perspective, but I think as we talk about the last letter in this, the E of eternal, you know, there is a perspective that people have, and it's either going to be boxed in to the here and now, the natural, what my five senses can comprehend, uh, or it's going to be based on, okay, there's a big picture. So today's electric bill, while I need to figure out how to pay that, it's not worth
Mhm.
getting into my spirit and destroying me in my peace, in my comfort, in my joy, in my
Right.
faith, right? Because there's a bigger picture. So talk about
Right.
how in your
Right.
life you had to make the shift. Because obviously you did have to make some sort of shift into, well, the here and now and the natural used to be the biggest thing on my radar. Okay, so now maybe my biggest
Mhm.
thing is, once you identify God inside you and who you really are, talk about how
Mhm.
your perspective had to change.
Well, man, again, I'll bring that back to my family. You know, I don't know if if you've had this happen before. I've had it several times. Maybe you're getting on your kid about something, and you know, it's like God's talking to you while you're getting on your kid, and He's like, "Yeah, dude, you too. You're doing the same thing. And so
Yeah.
what it forced me, having a family, and as we have multi, culture of family, having to raise a family like that, obviously you're being faced with the perspective from your wife. You're being faced with the perspective of your kid, or your older, who's white, and you're faced with the perspective of your youngest son who's mixed. And so there's a lot of different mentalities and thought processes there, and trying to lead that and package that has not been the easiest, because you learn it's not about being right, it's about reconciliation, or you always learn that it's bigger than you.
Yeah.
And so having to do that has forced me to think outside of myself. I think TD Jakes had put out a quote one time. He said, if you have a vision that you can accomplish all by yourself, you're thinking way too small.
Mm.
I've learned more. I've learned more as a person, especially teaching athletes, from sitting back and having to teach it than I ever did playing it. Because playing it, you see one perspective. Um, Having to teach it, there's like another wave of information that comes through your mind as you're teaching. And it reminds me of why God is always, in the word talks about how, to teach one another, encourage one, because the reality of the same things that apply to them apply to us too as
Yeah.
adults. We
Yeah.
know that. Sometimes we try to act like it doesn't apply, but we're a
Yeah.
child to someone else as well.
Right.
I'm a
Right.
child of God, and God is going to counsel me or life from his counsel, the way he counsels me, to filter into my children. So it's only natural that the same things that apply to him is going to apply to
Yeah.
me. This is younger versions of us.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
And they, the thing when you talk about coaching and being different than being a player, like you only have to worry about as a player, you don't have to worry about how you
yeah,
process information.
that's
When you're
it.
teaching or
That's it.
coaching or leading, you got to be concerned with how multiple people process
Everybody,
information, right?
every,
And you're impacting more than just you. And so that's a big shift in thinking. And man, that's good because you're talking about like I mean, I've heard pastors talk about it. I've talked like when I've taught a class at church, like the message I teach is usually about something that I need to learn about. Like it's
right.
usually me
Right.
preaching to myself almost. So our perspective being eternal, right? And it'd be nice to be able to transfer that information to our kids and let them understand, but it's
Yeah.
so hard. It's hard for us as adults, so it's hard for kids to grasp that. But you know, we talk a lot about to kind of round this out. We talk a lot about legacy. We talk about a lot about what's going to be our footprint. Like if I look back on the road that Daryl Jones traveled, what are we going to say is evidence that he was here? What's evidence that he had an impact? What did he leave here that's going to be timeless and live beyond him? You have anything to what will be your footprint if we look back?
Well, first and foremost, I mean, obviously he led people into a relationship with God. That's the first part. He increased the kingdom, as you would say. But the biggest thing, man, is he made me better. When I got around him, you know,
Mm,
I got better. Whether that was
yeah.
challenged by his words, by his actions, he made me better, and he gave me a different perspective about myself to where I wanted better. And I bring up the quote that I like to use with one of the programs that I'm actually working on called Dream, and to develop your dream. And um, it says, if your actions inspire others to dream more, to do more, to learn more, and become more, you are a leader.
Mm,
And that's one of the quotes
mm.
that I live by, and attempt to do that. I want people, when they get around me, I want them to be able to say, man, he made me want to be better. He made me be better.
That's so good. Yeah. And it comes out. I mean, you wouldn't be volunteering or coaching or leading or mentoring if that wasn't on your heart. Like you're not just out there doing it just for the sake of saying you're doing it. Like you're literally, I watch you, you're trying to impact that next generation, trying to impact leadership beyond you. So beyond your
Mhm.
years, like whatever's behind you, you're trying to impact those leaders behind you. So man, I think this has been awesome, dude. I love how we sort of unveiled like these myths that we've believed for so many years about ourselves, and we've let them kind of define us, and really the opposing force to that is truth. And so
Mhm.
you've opened our eyes on truth and how it's impacted your life, the change and the transition in you along from pro athletics to now you're pouring into other people and beyond just sports. So man, Daryl, on behalf of the audience, I want to thank you for coming on the show. I want to thank you for your insight, your perspective, your wisdom. Man, thank you for being a man of faith in the lives of young people. So audience, man, I think that you have gotten better than when you first clicked on this button to listen to this. I think you've progressed, you've learned something as I have. So
Hopefully.
yeah, man. And so I want to just thank Daryl on behalf of the audience. And audience, go out and apply some of this today. Examine yourself. Don't underestimate God and don't underestimate yourself, and uncover some of the things in you that can help you walk this out and be better. So until next time, be blessed.